This is a summary of week 4 of Pathwork Lecture 30, Pride, Self-Will, and Fear, 2026 version. And I corralled information on the spiritual purpose of human limitations into this section. And so there were a lot of questions and answers in the lecture, and I like to bring those up because they're relevant. People who asked questions then would likely ask the same questions today. So one of the questions was, what is spiritual death? And while the guide answered this, in its answer, there was not a mention of something else that I'm going to bring up. The answer was spiritual death is separation from spirit. Now, two things come out of that for me. One is that the use of the guide's actual words, separation from God, bring up the God image for a lot of people. And the God image is very often linked to a sense of authoritarianism, parents, authority figures, how the world works, instead of the spiritual concept of a creator. And so I tend to replace that very often with the idea of spirit, meaning it's not a person, place, or thing. It's an energy that has an ethics, a consciousness, so that spiritual death would be a separation from that spiritual energy, that spiritual consciousness. And when you hear separation from God, it can sound like you just walk in the next room. Separation from spirit and that spiritual consciousness, perhaps you get the idea that's not possible. And that's what the guide also says. It's not a final thing. It's not possible to completely separate. But the idea of turning your back on that, on trying to find a different explanation, a different way, is a form of separation. And this is where another concept comes in, and that is of words. Mentioned many, many times, words cannot carry the full meaning of what is true. Truth isn't in the words themselves. Truth is in the consciousness, in the reality of what is going on. The simple version is to say, I love you, doesn't prove anything, doesn't necessarily mean anything. It may be an expression of what is true. It may also be an attempt to deny what is true by trying to overrule it with one's willpower. It can be an attempt not to allow someone to peek beneath the surface, a sense of pride. No, this is the image I wish to project. I will insist upon it. Do not look beneath it. And the denial itself can be driven by fear. If I don't love you, I'm wrong, I'm bad, etc. So the words themselves need to be backed up with energy. But energy is not something that we can quantify. So we're left with the ability to prove in terms of facts or actions, or the feeling, I don't believe you, which is very difficult to defend sometimes. So spiritual death not being final, the idea is a form of spiritual death is a form of turning away from, protesting against. It leads to a deadening of substance because the life force emanates from the spiritual consciousness. Another aspect that was addressed was, what is the purpose of spiritual amnesia? What is spiritual amnesia? In the Pathwork lectures, the proposal is that when you come to the planet Earth, you have to accept a form of amnesia so that you do not remember who you are in the larger sense in spirit. You don't remember most, if any, of your previous incarnations, whether as a hawk or an amoeba or a Martian or a Venusian, or a person from another galaxy. There's not going to be an owner's manual given to you. There's a quality of having to start from scratch, having to start from a form of ignorance. Now, that ignorance still has the capacity to access the spiritual reality inside you, but that's a process. And so as a child, we don't have the tools to do that. We don't comprehend doing that. And so there's a lot of programming that goes on as children. layers and layers and layers of how to get through life that to some extent we spend the rest of our lives shedding. So the purpose of spiritual amnesia is to reduce our capacity to think our way out of a situation, to throw ourselves into the immersive experience of the dualistic drama on this planet that we designed with help, we designed to solidify our dualistic belief, to justify it, so that we can act it out and decide whether it's what we really want. So it's like you invent a play that imagines your if I was rich, then this, and you live out that life, and you find out that being rich is not a solution, or having a family with 3 children is not a solution, or being professionally adept is not a solution, that there's more to life than that. Now, if you took your whole being in, some of this might be easier, or you might see more options. So the spiritual amnesia is a way to limit your options and allow your environment to dictate to you because you don't remember what the truth is. There's also a section on expanded perception of self that was prompted by the question, what is the soul? Now, through various comments by the guide throughout the lectures, sometimes you have to read a lot of them to get the bits and pieces. My interpretation, my summary would be, and this is always mine, someone else could have a different summary. I see it as a series of nesting dolls, a series of concentric circles, just to be simplistic and 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, where you have the spirit, who you are, which is a part of the whole, but not. So you have a unique, if you want to call it energy signature, that exists in the whole and is part of the whole. It is still your own unique take on something. You have that, and you develop a portion of that in order to manifest on a given planet, given situation. And the portion that you are using has limitations. It's not all of you. It's the portion that needs development. And that's your soul. And so the soul is selected or separated out so that it can learn something in a given incarnation. The soul develops a personality, a concept of personality and who we are that it will work with in that incarnation. And then it manifests in a certain physical reality and appears on the earth. So that when you die, your personality dissolves, which is the personality sphere. There's a reality to that. But the soul also dissolves. It simply dissolves back into the whole, and it's as if its development is shared by the whole. So that this spiritual so-called death, meaning transformation of the soul back into the spirit, and then, of course, into another incarnation later. But this churning of energy and shifting of form is interpreted by the human mind, at least, as death. And that gives the grain of truth to, if I die, part of me will not exist anymore. And that is true. That's not the important part. That's just the dressing, the coating, the form that you took in order to gain a certain knowing, to gain certain experiences, to enact transformation, if not completed on this planet, then continued later. So there's no losing here. All inspired by the divine essence that powers our spirit. So the other aspect was that there's a limited perception of spiritual realities, as in the spiritual amnesia, as in the soul and the personality not having access to the entire thing, meaning that we see as humans, we see what we can comprehend. Now, we might be able to comprehend more in our full beingness, but that's not where we are. So we see things, but we only see what we can comprehend. Now, I look for Earth examples of this because I'm a human, and because it makes sense, and because it solidifies these somewhat vague, abstract concepts to me. So, in a film that I saw, there was or documentary, there was a story of how Native American Indians, I can't remember if it was North American or South American, um, when the Europeans landed, the natives did not recognize what a ship was. They knew what a canoe was. They had various ships that were powered by, they did not have giant sailboats. And when you see that docked in a harbor, it was as if they couldn't comprehend what it was. And as expressed, and I think there's some truth to this, it was basically invisible. It didn't enter their consciousness. They did not see it as a transportation item. They did not imagine people being on it. They didn't go there because it was just not in their reality. Seeing energy may or may not be in your reality. That doesn't mean it's not there. So that it's difficult when some people say they see auras or ghosts or they see various psychic phenomenon. I, for instance, do not see that. I have to decide whether to believe them. I might get a feeling, but if I describe that feeling to somebody else, they also decide whether I'm crazy or not. So that there's a limited perception of spiritual realities, and then we see what we want to see. We see what we're ready to see. Now, in the lecture, the guide describes this as some creatures, we call ourselves creatures, some creatures are not able to see beings of light. They're too far advanced for us to see. And all I'm trying to do is bring softer examples as examples of that, because I don't see advanced beings either. But that may be because it's just too far, or they're too highly developed and they're invisible to my sight. So I have to deal with what I can see. And what this whole thing circles around to is what I'm able to see is appropriate for the development that I'm supposed to be working on right now. It's not an accident. It's not a deficit of character. It was how I designed myself to progress. And I didn't need all this information. I just needed a certain amount. And the lack of information can be a big factor in what you're able to do. You can resent it, you can notice it, or you can develop other abilities to counteract your lack. But the important thing to remember is that it's not a judgment on you. It's not because you're bad and they forgot. So they sent you down to the planet Earth. Oops, we forgot to give her extra mental abilities. You were given what you needed to have. You were given everything you need to have to do what you need to do. So this kind of wraps up Patrick Lecture 30. Now, I'm going to be continuing into the month of March 2026 on pride, self-will, and fear. And the reason is that these three items crop up in at least a half dozen lectures. The guide will go sideways about the given topic and go into pride, self-will, and fear. I have noticed this over the years, but I don't think I noticed it as much as I have recently. And so I decided to expand on the concept by picking up a different lecture that also references pride, self-will, and fear from a slightly different angle. And my reason for doing this is I am beginning to realize that although my focus, one of the concepts that I work with on a very regular basis is reason, will, and emotion personality types, I am beginning to realize that from the guide's perspective, pride, self-will, and fear are the deeper supporting columns of that choice of personality. And I don't think I ever got that as clearly as I do now. It's one of the reasons I do these study guides. This is my way of studying to prepare material. And the revelations I have are what inspire me to keep going. So hopefully you'll take a look, read the lectures, or listen to them. This is Pathwork Lecture 30, Pride, Self-Will, and Fear. And thanks for listening to the video if you got this far.